All right, good afternoon, everybody, or if you're listening to this later, good morning or good evening, whatever time it is. Thanks for joining us here. Hopefully, we'll have a good show for you today. This is my first time trying to host a show, and um, we'll see how it goes. Kevin is being patient. I know he wants to jump in and actually do this professionally here, but we'll make it the best we can. Joining us today, we got Kevin and the one and only Mr. Dan Davis. Very grateful to have you both here. I don't want to spend too much time on pleasantries. There's a lot of news to talk about. One of the main things that I want to get into and start with is talking about the what's going on in California with the wildfires, what's led up to that, the consequences of it, etc. And I can't even imagine what it's like living over there and dealing with this. Not just the wildfires, but the incompetence, the mismanagement, the overregulation, all those things. Those are some things I want to talk about connected with this. So, thanks again. Thanks for joining. If anybody's watching, if you could please hit that like button, share the show, subscribe if you haven't already. And also, let's try to get the chat going. If there's anybody watching, just to get the chat going, where's everybody watching from? Do we have anybody? Which state are you watching it from? Sometimes we have different countries. So just to get the chat going, if you want to put in where you're watching from, where you're tuning in from, just to see some live on the chat. Hey, oh, there's one. Anyway, let's get into
That's
it.
me.
All right. Yeah. All right. Mr. Davis, I want to go first to you, just talking about what's
Sure.
going on in California.
Yeah.
Yes, take it away. What are your thoughts on what's been going on over there?
One of my first thoughts, I grew up in Southern California and
Mm,
not really near where I was a good bit south of where all of this is going on. I think most of the worst of things is actually north of towns, Santa
mm,
Monica and Malibu and Pacific Palisades. And that's where all the damage is really going. But one of the things that just, I don't know, I mean, maybe this is getting too deep too early in the show, but I know that that part of the country is not particularly fertile. It's not as green. There's not as much. There's not as much vegetation. There aren't as many trees. And it's one of the things that kind of strikes me to begin with here is to look at all the devastation going on and thinking, what exactly is burning out there? Because usually, I mean, if
mm,
you're okay, you're in Arkansas, right?
mhm.
And Arkansas makes a whole lot of sense. You got all the trees out there. You got the underbrush. You've got if you have a summer where you got no rain, everything dries out. The whole thing's a tinderbox. You could just see the whole thing, boom, just blowing up.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, California has never struck me that way. And so and you see the imagery of what's coming out, and especially Pacific Palisades, there are these communities, there are these areas that are everything's reduced to rubble. Okay.
yeah,
And not, I mean, and you got stucco and you got all these different materials out there that burn everything seems feels just a little bit unnatural to me. Now
yeah.
the other side of that is that the winds are legit. I mean, they're warned about the winds,
Mhm.
60 80 miles an hour. And certainly if a fire gets going, you can understand it transmitting from one house to, because it's just, you get some embers and they burn and everything gets out of control. So that's one thing that just feels a little bit off to me. But then, yeah, I think to me the story is the absolute, utter, complete mismanagement of things by the government out there. That
Yeah,
this fire did not have to be. If they had just taken care, if they tested the fire hydrants, if they had
yeah,
taken out some of the brush, if they had allowed water, fresh water, not to be flushed out in the ocean because of some stupid fish that doesn't even exist. All these different things that went on out there is helping to cause it to really create this fire as apocalyptic, as opposed to just something that was maybe a sub headline.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's a lot of thoughts on it, and I mean the whole thing just doesn't set well.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many different problems to address regarding it, and you see that in a lot of headlines, news stories. Um, I believe I've seen that this is one of the largest wildfires that they've had. I
Yeah.
saw a figure that there's been 16,000 acres that have been completely destroyed, completely left like in ash and rubble.
Hmm.
That putting about 70,000 residents out of a home. I've heard varying figures on there, but yeah, Kevin, one of the things that um, really seems funny to me, I hate the word, shouldn't use the word funny because it's not funny, it's sad and horrible. But the firefighters getting there, there's stories about firefighters getting there and the hydrants not having any water. Now, if you look at the map where the fires are going, what is it right next to? It's right next to the ocean. This is California. It's
Yeah.
literally the fire is right on the coast, but they don't have water to put out the fires.
Yeah.
That's just insanity. It just amazes is
Well,
amazing to me that there could be such bad mismanagement.
well, and that's what I mean. It always begs the question, right? We've been talking about this lately. Is what is the government's actual job, right? And it really
Right.
has pretty much one job, and that is to protect its citizens. I mean, and that's a big job, and that can be from war, it can be from famine, it can be from making sure they have roads to drive on and stuff. That all makes sense, but it also should be to protect them in whatever way they can from natural disasters. And this is something that I saw a clip from Joe Rogan. He did, I think, 3 or 4 months ago, where he said that there was a firefighter he talked to who said this is just waiting to happen. So this isn't
Mhm.
like just like a shock. It's
Mhm.
not like oh my goodness, no one saw this coming. They talked about it months ago. So eh, they could have seen this coming. They had to have seen this coming. I'd be interested. I want to talk to my grandpa, so my dad's dad, who actually worked in this field in California in this exact area. I'd be really curious to hear his thoughts. I'm gonna see if I can work on making that happen. And I think that would be interesting to hear his thoughts and see if it was the same issue back in what I guess that would have been the 70s, 80s, 90s, I suppose. And it probably was. I mean, I guess government, whenever government gets too big, the bigger it gets, the less competent it becomes. And I guess that's the lesson learned. And you wonder, you know, what is that going to take to change it? Is it just going to be a really good governor like DeSantis? Do you just need a DeSantis in
Mm.
California to fix it? It would certainly help. And maybe now California is going to wake up and say, "Hey, shoot, we don't want to burn down. We actually want to, be safe
Right.
and live normal lives." And maybe I could see this actually changing. I've said for a while I thought that California is moving red. I could see them being at least close to red in 2 years when we have the midterms, but who knows?
Yeah, well, we
Yeah.
saw with the election that there was a huge shift in that direction. A large percentage of California, for the most part, I think, shifted in that direction at least. But it's as he said, the government is there to provide for the common good of society, not just yeah, make California great again. That's that's good. Um, the common good is certainly not served by overemphasizing things to do with climate change and zero emissions and minimizing the carbon footprint. That isn't actually helping anything. It's not helping anybody. It's making things more difficult. But the things that do need to be done, that the government, that you need leadership, you need the government in these work and projects and things, is taking care of all the brush and everything. That's the reason that hasn't been done, and so that's why these wildfires are spreading so much. A brother of mine, one of my brothers, lives in Idaho, and he was saying the same thing there, that the underbrush in these forests and stuff. If you have like protected land or something, the environmentalists want to say you can't do anything to the trees, you can't do anything to the animals, and so let's introduce these wolves into that aren't even natural to the environment because we want to help save the animals. And then they introduce animals that aren't natural to the environment because they didn't do their research, and then they end up killing off the elk herd and the deer and then the cattle, and then it just creates this big problem. But just the brush itself, it's like you have to manage you have to manage this environment, this place. And that's something that one of the first charge of God to Adam and Eve in the garden was to work, was to tend the garden. This was paradise. This was before the fall of man, before original sin set in and the curse set in, and things got worse. God gave them the charge to tend the garden, and what you see here is this. Rather than subjugating the earth, rather than using the earth for the good of man, it's like man is supposed to be sacrificed for the good of the earth. It's just like it's like an inversion of those roles and importance. And so, in the name of protecting the earth, let's just destroy the human population.
Well, and I think really, Father, the subject, and you're exactly right here. The subjugation here of the environmentalists is really not. I mean, it is. They make it sound like it's for the sake of the earth, but really, the reality is for the sake of the elites, the financial elites, and so that because they're communists. What they're really after is they want to have a minimal amount of water. They want to have a minimal amount of food. They want to have a minimal amount of resources available so they can dictate who gets it, and they can dictate the terms on which people get food and water. And that's really, I think, ultimately what they're after here. And it's just one little, decision, one little fish, one little bird, one little turtle at a time that they use to try to get there. But I'll tell you a story real quick about my dad, who was the head of a water department out there in Long Beach, south of town. And when he was there, one of the things that he wanted to do, he actually had an initiative on the table to desalinate the ocean water. And I think he was starting to do a study to see, okay, if we desalinate and we take the salts, can we somehow take and make the salt a byproduct that we could then sell or break down into components and sell? And he said, as soon as you can take the byproduct of desalination and sell it, you're going to have a successful financial, operation out there. Well, he put these plans out there and they got rejected completely. And he has a little bit of a hard time articulating exactly why. But I think the politics of it is that people they didn't want to give up their power. If the power of a water board was going to be at the board level, and now this was going to change to some desalination plant was going to have the power, they didn't want to give up the power. That's all it was. They had no thought in terms of what the greater good was or what they could do for humanity or for their local economy. They just wanted what was best for themselves. And I think that really underwrites a lot of this.
Don't underestimate the pettiness of human nature, especially when pride and power are involved. For sure.
Yeah.
And don't let education get in the way of learning, as Mark Twain would say. That just, it always strikes me when it comes to this conversation about communism, that I think that you see that the state is able to control the masses. And I think back in the day, communism worked for a bit because the people were uneducated and you had kind of this ruling class, but weirdly, they've been able to shape it in the other way. They just control all education. So the communists have taken over, public schools and for sure the higher education. And so they're just able to shape the thought process of what, so if you go and you get an education, not for all, obviously you can be an engineer and a doctor and et cetera, and you can have a good education, but you're going in, you're studying green energy or whatever. And obviously they're just going to shape you into what they want you to be. And as Dad said, eventually it always ends up being the higher oligarchs or wherever they are, just getting more money and power. That's what it's all about. And I think that, but I do think, again, optimistically, I do think people are waking up to that. I really do. And I think that people are starting to realize that they're kind of being played. And I think they're starting to realize that the whole education thing is a scam. They're starting to realize that, that their leaders are not actually protecting them. And this type of thing is going to help. I mean, when you see the Hollywood sign practically up in flames, that's a big image. That's an image that people are going to really remember and think, wow, shoot. I mean, how did this happen? Is it just and I hope that they actually also think, hey, maybe this is punishment from God, because if there's anywhere that deserves it, it would certainly be Hollywood.
It would be California. Yeah.
Here's an interesting direction to take this, though. There's a really good podcast, the PBD podcast I like to recommend. It's the Patrick Bet David. He's Iranian born. He's American citizen now, business owner, brilliant guy, very successful businessman.
Yeah, I really like him.
Great a really interesting podcast. Some of he's got one rather liberal guy on the panel, so it sometimes makes for some interesting fights and debates. But he did a really good breakdown of this story yesterday. I recommend that. If people want some more information, they can definitely portray that info much better than I can. But one of the things he was pointing out was the difference between a natural disaster versus a man-made disaster, or something caused by man. He's saying, okay, Florida, you've got Governor Ron DeSantis down there. They have these natural disasters that you have no control over. And, there's a response. You take care of things. The leadership gets things going. But that's a natural disaster that you can't stop. There's nothing you can do about it. It's not caused by global warming. It's not caused by climate change. And it's not caused by people. But guess what the percentage of fires are started by people in California? Give a percentage. Good guess.
80%.
80%?
Yeah,
95%.
95%. Wow.
95% of wildfires in California. This is a story from a couple months ago. It's not like this isn't something that isn't known. They're writing stories about it. They know, they have the statistics. Like Dan, you were saying at the beginning, like, what's burning? How did it get started burning? There's no lightning. There's no thunder and lightning because there's no storms. There's no precipitation for most of the year, or a huge section of the year. So these are overwhelming majority man-made problems. Where's the prevention? Where's the problem? I mean, it's so many of them are from homeless people or other people that I don't know what the incentive is to burn down half of the state, but this is a man-made problem. It's constant. When people don't do their duty, there's consequences to that, and that's what we're seeing with the destruction of property, etc., and all this damage. But education, you're so right that's the education and media portraying certain narratives. There's another good documentary. Sister Clarisha shared it with me. She's one of the nuns from pre-Vatican II. She lives here in a assisted living home. It's called The Great Awakening, and this documentary, highly recommend it. Kind of talking about how far off things got politically and in the media, etc., and how you can just see the playbook of the communists and the way they did things and said things and the tactics they used during 2020 and following. It's a really, really interesting documentary. And they talk about this in particular with California and Gavin Newsom. I mean, you need leadership. And if you don't have it, if you have this political play acting, it's disgusting. There's a clip from a video from that video. If you could share that, Kevin. It's the first one that I sent you. This is on that podcast. They're talking about this. This is
from the PBD, right?
Where the first one that I sent you. It's the if you want to go ahead and share that. They're talking about they're cutting to a CNN talking about this. It's very interesting. Look at you could see the spin they try to put on this.
I see stuff here.
This clip gives perspective to people in America who don't know about this stuff.
Former LA mayoral candidate and real estate developer Rick Caruso criticizing the city's response to the windstorm and fires. He says officials should have been more prepared.
The real issue to me is twofold. We've had decades to go remove the brush in these hills that spreads so quickly. And the second is you got to have water. And my understanding is the reservoir was not refilled in time and in a timely manner to keep the hydrants going. So that's a failure, whether on DWP's part or another city agency. But this is basic stuff. This isn't high science here. And it's all about leadership and management that we're seeing a failure of. And all of these residents are paying the ultimate price for that.
Despite what you have heard from Caruso, no firefighters have told us that they are running out of water.
And let's go out to Gigi Gracia.
Oh, no, keep playing. I'm sorry. They just said that no firefighters have told them that they don't have water, and then they cut to this reporter on the ground. Go ahead.
She is 5 in Pacific Palisades. I know your signal's not the best, but
well, firefighters may be able to make out the emberstorm that we're in the middle of right now.
Oh my
This
God!
You can stop it.
This is when you try to. What a way to go! That she says no firefighters have told us this.
Well, let's talk about what was that. What was that reporter doing? That reporter was politicized.
Sorry, Fa?
The reporter is trying to the reporter. You can stop sharing that. The reporter, the host is trying to say, "Oh no, that we don't have any reports that the firefighters haven't given us any that are running out of water." And then the next second they cut to this person on the ground, and she's like, "Yeah, the firefighters told me that they're so much trying to spin this that this isn't the fault of the governor, etc."
Right. Well, and in 10 days, they've got their easy out. They'll just all blame it on Trump. And you can be sure that Gavin Newsom will blame things on Trump. I think he's already trying to. And, where was the federal response to all this? And so I guess for me, what's always interesting is, and I think the question I kind of have now out in California is that when you get the communists in control, and you look at Detroit, you look at Baltimore, you look at Philadelphia, where they've been in control for generations now, there is no bottom. They continually spiral down, and they consolidate power, and they spiral down, and consolidate power, and there's like this never-ending spiral. And the question, I think, and we may see it out in California, is there actually a rock bottom? Are they like alcoholics where there's a rock bottom, and the people finally say, enough? Okay, it looks like maybe Canada's reached that point. It looks like maybe Germany's reached that point. United States, to a certain degree, has California now reached that point where they're going to say, yeah, we got to just be done with this Gavin Newsom. And even the liberals have got to say, we got to move on we got to get some adults in the room.
For sure. And they've got to be feeling it. I mean, in the economy and everything. And Kevin, you were just saying that earlier about there's a shift, there's a turn in that direction, but it's still going to be costly. I mean, it's still going to cost a lot to get to that point. Even now, they were saying that they have so much regulation there that to get to put up anything on your property in the city, it's going to take like 2 years to get approval for putting up anything. It's the smallest little thing. And so if you've got this much property burned down, these many houses destroyed, they're going to want to rebuild, and they're going to be waiting for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years to get approval for anything. So what happens to all the people there in the meantime? It's pathetic.
Yeah, it's interesting to see where that's going to go. And I think, again, I do think, though, people are going to wake up to it. I think they see that news bit is really a great example that they're going to see. The question is, okay, so everyone kind of assumes that their governor is probably dumb, right? I think people haven't trusted government for a long time. I think, at least deep down, some people do, but I think most people are kind of like, yeah, the government. But I mean, I think the thing that really tricks people is education and media. And I think when people start to see the media really in your face trying to protect the governor, and they have to start thinking, why? Why is the media protecting the governor? Are they getting paid? Are they best friends? That there has to be a reason. I think that's a connection. That's a red pill. That's like, okay, so the news isn't the news. The news is a propaganda site from the government that's telling us what the government wants us to know. So it's and I think that now that you have Joe Rogan, you have Twitter, you have the traditionalists, I think you're going to have I think it's really going to be a great awakening. I think people are going to start saying, okay, okay, why didn't they take care of the brush? Why are they lying about the governor? And I think you are seeing that, and that's, again, exactly why Trump got elected. It's exactly why the AFD has a change. And I think it's a really positive thing, even though it means Hollywood has to burn down in the meantime.
Yeah.
One of the great lines from the campaign this year. I don't know if you guys remember this. That it was one of the hacks of I think CNN's Caitlin Collins was on a show. I want to say it was Bill Maher, one of the talk shows, and she's going back and forth, and she says something along the lines of them being independent journalists, them being unbiased journalists, and the crowd laughed. And
yes.
and literally she looks out of the crowd and she says, that was not meant to be a laugh line. But I mean, this is their own people, their own show. They're talking about it being unbiased and they're laughing. And so I think that that's where we are with the mainstream media. They're not even mainstream. Call them legacy, call them yesterday's news, but they pretty much exist. Elon Musk has made a point now on X frequently. He goes out and says, just remember, you are the news now. Not Caitlin Collins, not the mainstream.
Yeah, it's so. Yeah, you're right. It's so blatantly obvious. There's another CNN clip of Gavin Newsom responding to Trump calling on him to resign, and Newsom starts basically crying, saying, I can't believe he's politicizing this at a time like this when people are losing their homes and dying, that he would come and attack me. He's just so overcome with emotion about how horrible Trump is when he's completely incompetent. And what is it? Something like $24 billion in California tax dollars that are unaccounted for. $24 billion. It's like we're so used to hearing these numbers. Where's the accountability for that? There has to be. The LA mayor cut the firefighter budget 20 million, I think, just recently, so they can't do their jobs. But moving on from that, there's one comment here was asking about the insurance companies dropping the homeowners fire insurance, and that's definitely a story. They were talking about this months ago, and again, I'm talking about PBD again. But he did a video on this 4 months ago talking about the insurance companies in California. Have you heard, either of you heard much about this?
There's a lot of anecdotal evidence, a lot of people saying it. And I mean, I know one of the first ones I heard it from was James Woods, who's out there. He's a great conservative, good voice on X, and he lives there. And I think I'm not sure if his fire insurance, but he said a lot of people around him had been canceled. Their fire insurance had been canceled. And so, you got to ask the question, what did these insurance companies know? Who tipped them off? I mean, you can maybe make a case that they looked at the situation and say, wow, this is really being mismanaged and we don't feel comfortable because LA's not doing its part. So that's why we're going to cancel this coverage. That's the benign way of looking at it. The other side says, hey, this was an attack. The insurance companies knew it, and they decided to cash in on it, by canceling people's insurance. So that's one that's going to need some follow-up.
Well, and I think it's important with these things that, you start talking about that, Dad, and people are automatically thinking, oh, conspiracy theory. But I mean, just ponder it. I mean, look into the 9/11 and the fact that the Twin Towers were reinsured and sold, what was it, 2 weeks before? There's so many of these details that you find from these stories afterwards. It's like, this is weird. And why is it that the richest, or part of the richest part of Hawaii, these houses just burned down, except for like from Oprah and others, and then in California it's strange. And I'm not saying it's communists or alien lizards who the Queen of England is one of them. I mean, I don't know, but it's strange. We have to consider this stuff and say, something's not adding up here. This is very bizarre. And I don't know. I mean, like the comment I threw up on the screen earlier, the food processing plants burning too, trains being sabotaged. It's strange. And I think it could be not connected. It could just be random people doing bad things. I think that could be the case in California. I think you could just have people just burning things because they're bad people who are totally not connected to anyone. Or it could be lasers from outer space. And that sounds insane, but it could be. It really could. It actually is like possible that there is a laser beam weapon that is causing fires. And it sounds insane, but how many things that we've thought insane have come true in the last months?
Yeah,
a lot.
The conspiracy theorists have a lot better record than
the whole idea of too crazy to be true. Yes, exactly. But in the mainstream media, for sure. So I think we need to start, saying, hey, is it too crazy? I don't know. I mean, maybe not. Maybe it's not too crazy to think that this is all a plan for. Maybe it's just for real estate. Maybe it's the Hollywood actors, covering things up. Maybe it's the good guys smoking out the Hollywood actors. I mean, I don't know, but it's interesting. Certainly gives a lot to think about. And I think
let me give you a quick theory here, Kevin. I'll give you a quick theory that I've been kind of toying with, anyways. Is that if you look at humanity as the belle of the ball, as the homecoming queen, as the girl that everybody is after, and you look at the globalists as being kind of the abusive boyfriend that had been in charge all these years. Now you got Trump, you got this new wave of conservative politicians, and the people are basically ready to go out on a date with this new boyfriend, and basically the old boyfriend's just slashing tires, and as he's all going off the field, it's like, yeah, I'm going to make things as miserable as I'm going to create such a mess for Donald Trump that it's going to take him 4 years just to clean it up. And I'm not saying that that's the case, but I mean, it's something to consider.
Well, I've got a different take on it. I definitely agree that that there's the technology and all those things. I mean, somebody mentioned space lasers, and you think it's crazy. It's like, no, I know a gentleman that worked in government, doing making technology and such, and he said in the 80s they had lasers that could shoot down things in the satellites and stuff. It's come a long way since then. Technology, they can do all kinds of stuff, but my from what I've learned or read or listened to on this, I don't think that the insurance debate, I don't think that controversy is caused by some government plot, because these are companies at the end of the day. These are companies. It's a capitalist, society. These are companies that want to make money. That's what their purpose is. The purpose is to make money. They have to turn a profit. And if they are in a overly regulated state like California, they're not going to be making any money. They are losing. Some of these companies, I was listening to this video, some of these companies were losing billions of dollars a year, because of the overregulation, the bad policies that the state has in place. I was talking to one fella just 2 days ago that he used to live in California, and he was talking about this. He used to have a construction company, and he knows a lot about that area, or California. And he was saying, it's like they would regularly cut power to avoid getting sued by these people, because they had all these regulations, and they'd have some kind of fire or some kind of problem spark up, and then the companies would be sued an astronomical amount of money. So they couldn't keep the power going. They couldn't keep their business going because they're getting sued so much because they had these different regulations and stuff. So their response to it was, okay, we're just going to cut power, because if there's any risk in this environment or that environment, we are not going to risk losing millions of dollars so that you can have electricity for 6 hours today. So they'll just cut the power. I think at the end of the day, my thought on it, the one with Maui and Hawaii, I think there is certainly something going on there. But this one, I think it's just government incompetence, overregulation, companies wanting to turn a profit. And the ones that are still there in California, it's amazing that they're still even there. Most of them have left, but at the end of the day, they're companies. They have to make money. They have to pay for their employees. And I think there were a lot of factors that were showing there was high risk. And so they're like, okay, well, let's cut their policy, so we don't lose billions of dollars again in this next catastrophe.
Yeah. There's a good rule of thumb that I think applies here, Father, that says never ascribe to malice that which can be adequately described by incompetence. And and I think that there's probably a lot of truth in that. The insurance companies weren't the only one to pull out, right? In-N-Out Burger, you got Walgreens, you've got a lot of retailers have pulled out because it's unsafe and it's unprofitable. And so, yeah, to say that the insurance, the timing of it was incredibly unfortunate. But yeah, they're just following a trend that a lot of other companies have been on. So I think it's extremely plausible, like you say, that it was not conspiratorial, it's not that somebody knew in advance. It was just business.
Yeah. That's well, and it's like this is a combination of different factors that have been accumulating over time. It's not like, everything's been running smoothly and then all of a sudden one day they said, okay, here's a conspiracy, we're going to cut off this and cut off that and shoot the lasers and then start this fire. It's like all of the writing has been on the wall. All of these things have been leading up to it, so it didn't just happen overnight. It's
and I wonder too. I'm sorry to interrupt, Father. I wonder too. I mean, because the idea again that this is all a grand scheme, grand plan. It's like you start getting too far down that rabbit hole. And people saying the hurricanes are all planned and they're all being directed by these great. And I think that again, I really mean it at this point. I honestly kind of question everything. I don't honestly know what's true, what the government can or can't do. I think they can do for sure a lot that we don't know, that we don't understand, and that hopefully someday we'll find out that they've been able to do for years. UFOs being an example. But I do think that it takes away from the entire perspective of God's punishment. And I think again, the people, you read the stories of the Middle Ages and man, they got a plague and they said, well, shoot, we better stop sinning. That they had a fire and they said, well, shoot, we better go whip ourselves and get on our knees and pray that we don't get another fire. And I think that we don't think like that anymore. We think like, oh,
right.
It's a conspiracy, or it's just, oh, there's just a fire and bad winds. And I think maybe we lose something there. Maybe we got to get back to thinking, yeah, there's a fire in Hollywood. And maybe it is God's vengeance.
Yeah, yes, but again, this is something that's not like a storm. Okay, so just like so I want to unpack this a little bit. Just like you were saying, like we can't call out conspiracy where there is none, because then you start missing the actual conspiracies, the actual problems, the real ones, and you lack credence then, because you come across as just gullible and believing everything when there is a natural explanation for something that is incompetence or whatever. Okay, same thing with regard to looking at divine punishment as the direct cause of this. Now, I 100% agree, God punishes sin, and what is one of the greatest examples of a very sinful place? Obviously, it's Hollywood. I mean, there's probably no better, or it's not better, worse example of depravity than Hollywood. So in that sense, of course, there's a consequence of sin, divine punishment there, but it's the punishment, the consequence that falls, that comes after what natural explanation? Man's depravity, yes. Man's lack of being honest, doing what they're supposed to be doing, following more law. The government incompetence, that comes from electing bad leaders, that comes from having a depraved society. But I'm kind of losing my train of thought here. My apologies. That basically, I'm just saying, like, this isn't like God sent a fireball down to destroy California. It was probably a homeless person, lighting the fire. So is it divine punishment? God allowing these things to some degree, yes. But the direct cause, I don't think that God sent a fireball. I think that this was, a homeless person. God allowing a hurricane coming, that's a natural disaster that, isn't coming from man. But I think there's a separate distinction there. About
what do you think then about the, let's say that the high winds, so if you have the bum setting the fire, maybe you have the 80 mile an hour winds, which are God,
okay, well,
putting little saying,
right.
I don't know. I mean, and again, I think
the
you're
flames,
right, yeah. I mean, and it's hard to attribute. We don't know God's plan or what God's doing. But I think again, you look back in the past, they had a much different perspective of that. They had a much different, like, okay, God, please, spare us. We'll be better. And we just don't. Nobody cares. This happens, and it's like, oh well, shoot. Well, I guess we'll cut the bushes next time. Is that it? Really? Nothing else? That's too bad. Oh, there goes Dad. Well, Dad, hopefully that wasn't punishment for something. Dad, still there. I think it's just your camera. Yeah, right. What'd you do? I'd be curious to hear everyone in the comment section. I mean, what do you guys think? Do you think this is just a comedy of errors? Is it? And I think that is the most likely. I totally agree with you, Father. I think that is most likely what it is. Do you think it's government planned? Is it the Hollywood elites, fleeing and burning out their rat's nests as they go? Let us know what you think. I'd be really curious. And again,
Yeah.
I think we're probably all kind of on the same page with Father and Dad. I think it's most likely not bad luck. What do you want to call it? Really high winds and bad people setting fires at the wrong time. Bad luck. Dad, are you still there?
Certainly.
Did we just not see you? No, I guess
I'm not getting any audio.
Like he shows me he's here. Strange.
Huh. That's interesting.
But now you can see Pope Pius XII, so it's good. It helped out my frame.
No problem there. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's an interesting conversation. Your thoughts and prayers are definitely with the victims of this. I can't imagine what it's like to have your home and everything just completely destroyed and be living in that environment. It's sure grateful to God for where I live. I don't know what it's like in Germany there, but I definitely like getting out of cities and places like that. It's kind of there's a I don't know if we want to keep talking on this or go on to a different topic, but there's kind of a little fun, interesting subject was Mel Gibson being on the Joe Rogan podcast yesterday. I did listen to it. I drive a lot, and I'm also doing a lot of other things. I like to listen to podcasts while I'm doing that. And it's a typical Joe Rogan interview. So there's profanity. There's God's name used in vain. Always opportunity to make reparation when you hear that done. But it's a over 2 hour long interview. But he has this great moment. I'm sure most of our audience here has probably already seen it, where Mel Gibson brings up, there's a different church, that there's the Reformation, a different church after Vatican II, and the response is just great. Can we share this? I think I sent it to you here. Let me double check.
That was the second one you sent me, right, Father? Did you have it? I don't think I had a timestamp for that, though.
Okay, I've got 3511 for the timestamp. I think I sent you the right one. If not, I'll try sending it again.
That's the LA mayor.
Okay.
Let's see.
Oh yeah, there's another. Okay, I just sent you.
All right, let's pull
the.
My internet is really bad today. The good thing is it seems like it's not affecting anyone else's viewing, so that's awesome. For me, it's kind of miserable, but as long as it hasn't affected anybody else. Okay, sorry, I'm still trying to load this, Father. Just a sec. Oh, I think that was the problem. All right.
Timestamp is 3511.
I'm pulling it up here.
It's nice to see this brought up before such a huge audience. There's probably a couple million views on it by now. 3 million views.
3 million, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I think I got it, Father. Here we go. Let's pull this up.
All right. This is just a little bit of the conversation.
You said 3511, though.
3511. That's what I got. I just love Joe Rogan's response. Just a logical, reasonable response.
That had molested, and he moved him to some new place where he.
Boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
That's the dirtiest, most evil practice that the Catholic Church has been accused of.
I think so, and many institutions as well. But that is a very bad one.
There we go. Right.
And I think it's all part and parcel of the same corruption that crept in. And when you asked what's the difference between pre-Vatican II, so Vatican II happened, and of course they took the church and they reformed it, and they changed things in it. And it didn't necessarily agree with everything that went before it. And up to that point, you could find it agreed with itself. But all of a sudden, you got something else, to the point where now, I mean, we got a pope that brought a South American idol into the church to worship.
Really?
He did. The Pachamama. He bought the South and he got.
I don't know what that is.
It's kind of like a South American god, Pachamama.
Why would he do that?
Good question. But he did.
Did he have an explanation for why he did it?
Yeah, it's kind of a weasel-worded thing of like, oh, all religions are just as good as one another. But, you know, if that's his contention...
He shouldn't be the Pope.
No. I mean,
how can you be the Pope if you say all religions are just as good?
Yeah, we all worship, you know. So, yeah, there's a Pachamama. There you go.
So
we could stop
there. Therein is the rub. Huh?
How can you be the Pope if you believe all religions are good? It's nice to see that actually brought up before such a large audience. You know, Mel Gibson is of the position, or at least his father was, that I believe he is too, that, you know, that there can't be any new ordinations of priests after the ones with ordinary jurisdiction or whatever passed away. So he doesn't agree with our position, but there's elements there at least that align. And certainly he needs prayers because obviously he's not living in a state where he is, you know, I think it's divorced and remarried, or he's talking about his girlfriend and other things. So certainly problems there. Pray for him, because he's certainly done a lot of good just making the movie The Passion, and he certainly stirred up a huge hornet's nest there, and a lot of attacks. I'm surprised to see him in a public setting like this, being interviewed, you know, after so many years and being like a pariah, you know. But now's the time things are shifting in the culture, I think so it's okay to bring these people back on again, but certainly pray for him because if any of us, I think, had been in that environment in Hollywood through the 90s and the 2000s and whatnot, I don't know how you would save your soul. And the fact that he's you know, did so much good with the Passion, and he's talking about the resurrection, talking about making the sequel to it, getting Jim Caviezel back and whatnot. So very, very interesting. But I wanted to ask if you guys had any thoughts on this, if you had time to listen to the interview or any points.
I saw the clips. I saw the clips of it, and it is impressive. And I think that you know, we were talking about this a little bit in our show last night with Dominic, that one of the things that I appreciate about Joe Rogan is that he's intellectually curious. I think he's intellectually honest, and I think that's why he draws such a great audience. He goes over the course of 3 hours, and I think you can't help but go 3 hours and be authentic. And you know, and here we are living in this media made up reality that is the exact antithesis of authentic. And at least Joe Rogan is kind of bringing us back to some of that authenticity. And so I think what you're kind of seeing is that a lot of truth is getting out there. And I think a lot of with Joe Rogan's help, a lot of the dumb lies are kind of being you know, cast aside, and probably the more sophisticated lies are you know, still taking root. It's not like he's, you know, Joe Rogan's not really one of us theologically, obviously, but I think that to see Mel Gibson's message get out there to such a big audience, absolutely let's take the W, let's take the win.
Yeah, I want to comment on that real quick. This is a really good point that no one ever talks about. We want to talk about this actually in a coming podcast. This is absolutely true, even though we're talking about the Novus Ordo here, not the true Catholic Church. Even so, Protestants are much higher, and public schools are something like 20 times higher, way higher. So the Catholic Church gets always picked on, and it's absolutely not true. It is. It does happen. It has happened. Yeah. It's terrible. I don't mean it hasn't happened, but you know, making it like they're the only ones who do it is absolutely a farce. In my thoughts about Mel Gibson, I think, like Dad said, I think that it is a big win. And I think I see people in the comments saying he should have done this and this. I totally agree. I wish he had our exact position and was donating millions of dollars to all of our churches. I mean, again, this is we talk about these things all the time, right? What is the ideal? Of course, that's what we want. We want everyone to be Catholic. So we need to take what actually happens. What is the actual reality? The reality is there are millions of people watching this video saying, wait a second, the Pope did what? And Joe Rogan saying, then he shouldn't be the Pope. And Mel Gibson saying, yeah, That's a huge deal, guys. That's huge. That's gigantic.
No,
this is on the guys. Sorry, real quick, Dad. This is on the footsteps, following the footsteps of January 1st to the 4th. A rosary podcast being the #1 podcast in the world above Joe Rogan.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
All you black pillars out there, oh well, it's a Novus Ordo podcast. Yeah, I get it, guys. Of course it is. You know, if it's going to be, maybe it's Father Geckle in a year. That's the point. We're taking baby steps towards truth in it, but you can see it. Who would have ever thought 5 years ago that a rosary podcast, whoever is leading it, is the #1 podcast in the world? That's crazy. And that's an awesome news. And this podcast is another step towards it too. We're moving in the right direction.
In the right direction. One of the things that I think we really tend to fail at as trads, there's if you're not familiar with the term the Overton window. Okay, the Overton window is basically the left and right boundaries of normal public conversation. Okay. And so with this rosary podcast, it's Novus Ordo. Yeah, it's got its issues in that way. And so it's not a perfect thing. But guess what? It's taken on some attention and it's moved the Overton window to include the rosary in mainstream discussion. Okay. So that's where we have to, and to me, that's one of the best things we can do with these podcasts. Is one of the best things that Mel Gibson can do with Joe Rogan. All these things. We're moving the terms of the debate and we're moving it in our direction. Now, it's not the debate that we want, but it's moving in our direction.
Yep. The don't let the perfect become the enemy of the good.
Right. Exactly.
And you know, my thought on so many of the things that he could have said or didn't say or whatever, I won't even get into that because it could be, well, there's so many different reasons to account for that. For one thing, he's talking to Joe Rogan, who doesn't even believe that Christ is God. You know, he's not a Christian, even though he's had conversations with so many different people that give him all of this proof of it. And so it sure would have been great for the conversation, but it wouldn't have really added. It would have been great for the audience, but it wouldn't, I think it would have just gone over Rogan's head. So I don't think Mel Gibson would have brought it up. And also, it's like, you know, if you're in a position where, you know, if you're not receiving the sacraments anyway, you know, because of the state that you're living in, you're probably not able to do that for decades or years or whatever. It's not probable that you're going to have the extra grace there that you need to handle such situations. But anyway, it's neither here nor there.
And I have to say too, I mean, Father, you've been a guest on a podcast on many times, right? And I have a few times, Dad, you have too. So everyone in hindsight is like, well, he should have said, well, why didn't he blame the Jews? It's like, guys, have you ever been in front of millions of people with the biggest podcaster in the world and you're just supposed to have come on, guys, I just don't understand how our sense of reality is totally skewed. It's just like, well, he should have said this and he should be saying it. Yes.
Well,
we
let
know.
me give you a little.
That. Of course we want that. Come on, guys. Take a chill pill and just take win.
Take the W.
Please.
Let me give you a little anecdote today. I just saw this today. Eric Sammons. I'm not a big fan of Eric Sammons. He's basically the voice of 1 Peter 5. And he's really kind of ardently anti-Sede. I call him a gatekeeper. He's a gatekeeper for the Novus Ordo, keeping people from going Senate contests. But anyways, he was talking about Mel Gibson today and giving him some kudos. He said, you know, he made some really good points, and he pointed a finger at Rome, and Rome deserved to have a finger pointed at him. So this Novus Ordo priest comes in and says, how dare you give this Mel Gibson any airtime? How dare you even acknowledge it? In fact, Eric Sammons, I think you're a Senate contest. And, he goes off on him. But, I mean, here you have dissension going on amongst the enemy because of something good that came from upstream, even though it wasn't perfect. So, I think this was definitely a good thing.
Well, it's just sad because there's so much confusion and so many people that are so well-intentioned don't know where to go because the positions of the R&R and other groups that they're in don't make sense. And so they're like, you know, if the blind lead the blind, you know, they both fall into a pit. I think that's a tragedy. And it's like I saw a clip of an interview of Michael Knowles with Charlie Kirk the other day, And I just saw a very brief clip of it where basically they got into the Pope, and Charlie Kirk basically saying that, he says crazy things, so maybe he's not the Pope. It said something along that line. And Michael Knowles, who I can have a love-hate thought with regard to Michael Knowles, because so many things that he says are like, oh my gosh, he's talking about Thomistic theology and the proper role of husbands and wives in marriage and all this other stuff. And so many things he says is so good, but then he's just so off on so many other things. So be that as it may, but the reaction that Michael Knowles had to that was kind of like, what can you say to that? Because it's too logical, So it really undermines the Catholic position, and it makes it seem like the Protestant response is the way to go. Unfortunately, just like Mel Gibson, for example, having the belief that there is no you have to have ordinary jurisdiction. Well, when all of the old priests die off, then what are you left to? Well, then I guess we have to go to the R&R or some other group like that. So, that position is also just not tenable. It's not something that that can withstand the test of time. But yeah, it's interesting. I think we all agree it's good to at least have some of that out there. Kind of want to leave that topic aside, and I don't know how much longer you guys want to keep going.
As long as you want.
Okay, I'm good to keep going. I don't know about you, Kevin.
I got a couple minutes left in me.
A couple minutes left.
Past my bedtime.
It's
10:30 here, guys. It's 10, but it is a Friday night, and I can't sleep in a little bit. So,
well, I just want to say,
chat. What do you think? Should I stay or go? Let me know.
Vote Kevin out. Vote. No, just kidding.
You are the weakest link. Goodbye.
Yeah, you are the weakest link. No, I was telling Kevin before we started how getting into this and trying to do content and whatnot makes me appreciate all the work and time and effort that goes into it. Just the other day, I was trying to communicate with Kevin about, okay, when are we going to do it the show? What are we going to do it on? And when are we going to do it? And Kevin was like, well, I can't do it today. And tomorrow I got 2 shows, and the next day I got another show, and then this and that and everything else. And I just want to say, Kevin, really appreciate all the effort and everybody.
It's a lot of work.
A lot of people like to criticize Kevin, and in private we can criticize him all we want, sure. But one thing I got to say, I really appreciate all the effort and time that you've been doing this for years now, and I've always appreciated it, but I certainly appreciate it a lot more now. So thank you for that. And I'm not getting paid to say this, people. I'm not getting paid at all.
It's a platform. Kevin doesn't have any money, so yeah, it's a platform that has helped to change the world for the better. I really have to say that, Kevin. That Catholic Family Podcast, and now the Traditionalist, which is kind of growing like a weed, which is wonderful. And you've done a marvelous job of putting it all together.
Well, thank you. I
much
don't deserve that, guys. But I do appreciate it, and that actually is a good reminder. Everyone should go over to the Traditionalist if you're watching on Catholic Family Podcast. You can just search the Traditionalist. I'll pull it up if we keep moving on. I'll throw up a link so everyone can go over there and subscribe and hit the bell on Catholic Family Podcast too, because that will be aware there is a podcast. And I understand we do a lot of podcasts, so I get it. Maybe that's too much for you. If it is, then fine. Come in when you want. But if you want to know when there's a podcast, make sure you hit the bell. I think not everyone knows that. I think sometimes they think, okay, I've subscribed. No, you have to hit the bell. So then you get a notification that says, hey, there's a new podcast, which in this case, what you may be hearing 2 a day, one from Traditionalist and one from Catholic Family Podcast. But it is, and I think it's an incredible thing what it's turned into. Father Geckle and Dad, you both were there really at the beginning. Father Geckle, I think you did the second podcast ever, was maybe third or fourth, very beginning. And it really, what it's turned into is incredible. And I think again, though, it shows me there's a need for this. There's a need for truth and good conversations. And even if we're wrong and have dumb opinions and talk about aliens and stuff, it's still coming from the right perspective, and it's coming from an honest Catholic, viewpoint, which I think is super important. And I really think, again, seeing the Rosary being the #1 topic on podcasts, there's something here.
Yeah, and I'll tell you,
they may need more patience, but there's something here.
There's something here, and I'll tell you a trend that I think I'm seeing reversing, a very good trend. going all the way back to my generation. Okay, I'm Gen X, and kind of grew up with Sesame Street, and that was really the first effort of mass media to really try to kill our sense of attention span. And it's only gotten worse from there. You know, you've got all the sitcoms on TV and all this different kids cartoons have gotten frenetic and stupid, and now you got TikTok and all that. But you think about it, who's the number one podcast in the world? It's Joe Rogan. He goes on for 3 hours. And I really think what one of the trends going, and this might be a little bit of a gut punch for the three of us to a degree, because I think what's going on is you're seeing a reversal of that trend towards the shorter attention span, and people are now looking for authenticity, and they're willing to invest their time in it. That's what Joe Rogan is teaching us. So as you go on to these longer podcasts, I think that you have to get real. And I think people are willing to hear you out because they want to hear something that's real. And I think that's a lot of what you guys give.
Well, would you say there's also this there's more of a virtual world that we've created for ourselves, or that they have created for ourselves? So there's a lot less interaction in person with people. So you have fewer conversations yourself with other people. There's I just listened to the story yesterday that there are now college courses to help college students overcome their phobia of talking on the phone. Like they're literally giving classes about how to talk on the phone because they're traumatized by talking to another person and being awkward and whatever. And but that's beside the point. There's so much of this virtual world created, and people want to get away from that now. There's a move to get away from that and actually hear a real conversation, even if you're not a part of it in person talking, at least hearing somebody else talk. And it's nice. I do it all the time, even, not listening to myself, but listening to other podcasts and stuff. It's just nice to have that in the background for sure.
There's a great podcast. This is same topic basically, but there's a great podcast by the Sisters of St. Thomas of Aquinas that they talk about classical education. And I think it's so, for anyone who does homeschooling, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. Again, I'll try to remember to get the link here. And you can search it, go find their channel, and they don't have that many videos. You can find the one about classical education. It's really interesting because really the big point of it is to make you train your faculties. And that doesn't necessarily mean you get a book list and you read 10 books in the year and you give your own summary on it. As a 15-year-old, it's like, hey, I just read Moby Dick, and now it's a book about a guy who's searching after a whale and he's crazy, and so it's like, okay, great. What did that actually help? In classical education, they would have taken, say a paragraph from that book or a book, and then you would have really studied it, and you would have studied it, its grammar, its formation, its meaning, and you would have come to make sense of it. And that makes so much sense. It's like, yes, that's what we need. We need to actually consider and ponder, and not just like boom, boom. Okay, quick
dopamine hit.
That's what we.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And now the kids are getting this at 2 years old. They're watching these. We in our kids every now and then get to watch a cartoon, but very rarely. But we've learned that if we let them, rarely, has to be something really slow. And it's these older cartoons that have very nice themes, and they're very slow. But man, you watch some of these, the biggest children's show, which what was it called? Parents in the chat, help me out. Something melon. Anyway, you watch an episode and it's like frenetic and it's colorful and it's always moving and every scene is big and colorful and bright, and I'm telling you, it's bad for your brain. And I think, again, go watch this episode of The Sisters, especially if you homeschool. You're going to learn a lot. I think you're going to consider completely differently how you should teach your children, not just giving them quantity, giving them quality. And I think it's the same with what we put in our heads with any sort of media or learning, right? I think that's what a lesson that is.
Yes, and it's nice to see that there's more awareness of that coming out there. More, it's harmed so many people and kids and teenagers. It's harmed them so much that it's good to see. It's good to see a movement away from that and a change in our culture. Happy to see that. Moving on, we could Dan, if you're interested in staying, there's more that I would like to talk about with regard.
Yeah,
to
let me. I'll
and
tell you
some of
what.
the things.
Real quick before we move on, let me put out a little plug here that Dominic and I are actually looking at a show this coming Thursday, and all about the alien deception, and I call it the Grand Deception, and trying to get into. I really believe that we've got major disclosure. There's going to be stuff coming up that I think is going to directly challenge our belief in Christ, and it's going to question the Genesis story. It's going to question the origins of man, our place in the universe, all that kind of thing. And I think we need to be prepared for it. So just as a quick preview, that's if everything goes well, this Thursday or the following Thursday, we will have a show that's Crusader Filmworks here is actually on the alien deception.
Nice. Yeah, and see, that's an interest that brings up a thought, just an interest to me. Like the way things are going now, it seems like there's more and more a divide, a separation between those who have a basis in Christianity. I don't believe that non-Catholics are considered Christians. That's what the church says. But people that believe in Christ, people that at least have some semblance of that follow, a Christian-based religion, versus the liberal side, which is so diametrically opposed. I wonder if it's going to turn into this huge divide in society. I mean, it is now, but I mean, you're going to have potentially completely different lives and government and style and everything. I wonder how much that's going to come across, especially with AI and robotics developing as they are and whatnot. It's really intriguing to see what the future is going to bring with so much different viewpoints. And it's very interesting. Nobody can see the future here, but could be some interesting times ahead.
Yeah, I think that the devil spent 500 years now tilling the soil in terms of slowly weakening our belief in God, our focus on God, and putting our focus on ourselves. And I think he's probably ready for a final harvest that way. And whatever the deception is, whether it's Christ here and Christ there, and he's the Matthew, I think Matthew 25, great deception or whatever it is. I think that the devil's not done with us yet.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, I still wonder if it's actually going to be a kind of a dud. It's going to be one of those fireworks that the firecrackers you light off, and you're expecting this boom, and because it's like, whee! I kind of wonder if that's where this is all kind of headed. Everyone is expecting the end of the world, I think, in a way, to be soon and to be big and glorious. And I actually wonder if it's actually just not. If it's actually just going to be. Yeah, it's going to be hard, and there's going to be battle, issues with society, and you're going to have ups and downs, and liberal and Democrat, and kings fall, and et cetera. And I think it's all going to happen. But I wonder if it's actually just going to be kind of, well, the people who keep having children are going to survive, and those who don't are going to not. And I just think in a generation or two, you're going to have Christians, Muslims, and probably Jews. That's more end of the world theme, right? That's more like, that seems like the history of the world rather than society. You're killing each other over gay stuff or whatever, whatever the issue is at the time. It seems like it's going to be a religious battle in the end, to me. And I think that's my recent theory, that it's all going to end up coming down to, okay, all of your dumb liberal people are just going to die off because they don't have children, and there's going to be your traditionalists who are going to be Muslims, Jews, and Catholics, and then it's going to be maybe that's the battle. And I who knows? But that's kind of my thought. It could be.
Well, I think it all depends on what stage we are. No one knows when the end is coming. And so when all of that happens with the Antichrist and all of that, that's going to be the most difficult time in human existence, to stay true to God. The heading of the that one documentary you did, The Cedars of Lebanon, that quote from St. Louis de Montfort, that the saints of the end times will outshine the saints of old, like the cedars of Lebanon. It's like, you look at St. Francis of Assisi and the early Roman martyrs and whatever, they're going to be outshone by orders of magnitude by the saints of the end times. So it's obviously going to be a lot worse. Where we are, though, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm just was going to say, just keeping the Catholic faith full and entire is an act of heroic virtue in the final times.
It's well, and that's certainly true right now. It's a lot harder to live in our modern world with entertainment as it is and society the way it is. It's a lot harder to keep any base to just stay in the state of sanctifying grace in our time than it was to, be in a cloister in a convent and give your whole life to God. It's such a different culture. So the smaller things are a lot harder now. So that means that they're going to be a lot more meritorious and a lot more transformative, at least maybe not as shiny. but anyway, it's all depends on the stage. If we are not there yet, and I like to believe that we're not there yet, and that this is we're going to have a restoration of the church, a true pope again, and that will rise once again. That's my personal belief. I like it. I don't believe that that's 100% what's going to happen, because no one knows. But
we don't know.
No one knows. But it all depends on what time, what stage we're in, and God knows.
Yeah, the voice that really has kind of changed my perspective this way, and I'm more towards your point of view here, Father, that Dominic Geckle and the show he had on that Divine Poetry, where basically the events, the cycles of history repeat themselves over and over again. And just listening to him and how all of these themes have played out over and over again throughout the course of time in the church history and all, it got me thinking about the possibility that, okay, you got the revolt of 2 Thessalonians, right? Before the Antichrist comes will be the revolt. And we are in a revolt. There's no question about it. We're revolting against the Catholic faith. But maybe it's not the revolt. Maybe it's a revolt. And so we kind of come out of it. We, like you say, the church is restored. We go through a couple hundred years, go through 1,000 years of Christ's reign on earth. I mean, there's a lot of different things. And then we go through it again because it all rhymes. Right. And I think
history
that was
echoes.
It echoes, yeah. And that was a powerful message, I think, that has really gotten me to be more fluid in terms of how I look at where we are today. We might be in the end times, we might not.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's very harmful individually, but more especially to our neighbor, to have a set opinion about such things and to be 100% certain, and then to have such strong opinions that they're opinions, they're not matters of faith and morals, and to treat them as something that's going to happen, it can cause a lot of it's harder to swallow that pill, and it can be destructive. It can be very destructive. I think everyone knows some people that unfortunately have fallen into that, but anyway, interesting times we're living in. Just a little story. Bishop Ivarunis, I had the pleasure, the honor, maybe it wasn't a pleasure, but it was an honor, to be able to work with him for quite a few years there in Omaha. And if you've ever been around the bishop when things are really stressful and really rough, and there's some big problems going on, and he's trying to solve these issues or solve that problem or take care of that issue, he's the best person for solving problems. He that's what he lives for, is to solve problems. And I remember so many times where we'd be like, in the rectory talking with him, myself, Father Borja, and some others, and we'd be talking about this really bad issue, and just how difficult it was and what we're going to do and whatever. And then he'd like stop and kind of smile and go, "Aren't you glad we don't live in those boring old days, where everything was all normal and easy? And it's, these are really exciting times to live in." It's a crack some kind of joke like that. And it's good to keep your sense of humor and some positive view, regardless of what's going on. But
and the right. God put us here at the exact time where we're supposed to be, and that's a. And I mean, we played the game the other day where you get these cards and you ask these types of deep questions during, kind of a party game. And that was one of the questions, like, if you could live during any time of history, when would it be? And I was kind of, I'm really intrigued by the Crusades. I think that's a very interesting time. I like that idea of crusading, but again, obviously, the obvious answer is it has to be now, right? Because if not, then it would be but it was also kind of like, okay, guys, we can't all say that.
It's a thought experiment, Yeah.
Exactly. Come on, that makes for a very lame party if we're all just like, oh, God's will. It's like, yes, we know. Again, it's kind of this whole topic. It's like, okay, guys,
yeah,
we get what it should be, but what it is an interesting question. But I think it is. And I think that's kind of. And I really don't want to always turn these things into Catholic action, but I think that's what we kind of need to think of it, though, is that we are living in the Crusades, right? I mean, we're not literally storming Jerusalem, but it's actually worse than that, right? I mean,
yeah,
the
devil, spiritual
combat
for sure.
Yeah, they've taken everything. They've literally taken Rome and our churches, and not just Jerusalem, and I shouldn't say just Jerusalem. That was a huge thing. But I mean, it's gotten so bad, even if you just say culturally, that Germany is allowing in the Muslims. You fought for 1,500 years, and then it's just like, okay, come on in. Oh, are you a male, a fighting age Muslim? Great, bring your buddies, call your cousins, come on in. And it's so horrible. You read these books about the Crusades, and then you walk through Munich, and it's like, well, that was nice. That was. Thanks for that, guys. I appreciate all your hard battles. Sobieski, you these amazing feats of honor and strength and godliness, and then we live in these days. And I think that's why we had to remember to, again, as you said, Father, kind of, if it's not the end time, if it's the end times or not, our struggles are just different struggles. It's a different crusade. It's a different fight. And I think that's if you wake up every morning and think, okay, I'm gonna, I need to put on that red cross, the Crusader cross, and fight my own battles. I guess that will hopefully bring us one step closer to defeating the invader, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, we are sealed with the sign of the cross at our baptism, so we carry it from our baptism. So, but hey, that's a really good segue into the UK and what's going on over there. Thanks, Kevin.
You're welcome,
because there's some topics I kind of want to talk about in connection with this, not getting into any sensitive details, certainly not, but there's some societal topics and matters of justice and penalty that I think could make for an interesting conversation here regarding what's going on in the UK. The cover up there. Certainly a big topic. So any interest in pursuing that topic?
Yeah, sure. I can give it a few minutes. Yeah, I think I got to run in about 7 or 8 minutes, probably something like that. But I'm up for it.
Why don't you go first then?
Yeah.
I mean, again, of course, it's what happens when. I mean, there's a lot of different issues. Obviously, I mean, it's when you have a government that's ridiculously stupid and evil, and they allow in people who don't want to, be part of your society and are ridiculously stupid and evil, and I think also probably honestly the biggest thing is you take away any punishment. These people are just barely punished. I think there is I've said this many times on Catholic Family Podcast. I think there is definitely something to be had with corporal punishment, with public punishment. Now, I'm not saying public hangings. I think that's too extreme, and that got to be really brutal and gross, and people enjoyed it and stuff. But I think the idea of public whippings and stuff. I mean, I think these people the men who did this should be executed. I mean, no question. I mean, sorry, for me, that's not even a question. I am fully pro death penalty, and this is exactly the case where no, you're gone. I hope you confess. I hope you get good with God, and then you should not be on this planet. And
harm against children. Yeah.
No, exactly. This type of thing. No, you're gone.
Well, and what I'm curious what your thoughts are. Would you extend that to the officials that knew it was happening and allowed it to happen and covered it up?
A death penalty, no, but I absolutely think they should be tarred and feathered and banished from society. I mean, maybe prison. That's a good question, but I mean but I guess it's a hard that's a hard line. Is okay. At what point, what level of allowance? I mean, and I think, but I do think anyone who absolutely, did let this happen, for sure shouldn't hold any form of government position. But I think that you need to have. I got to be really careful what I say. You don't want public hangings. Again, it's not. We don't want the French Revolution. That's not what I'm saying. You want justice, but certainly justice needs to actually be justice. You need to actually people who do something wrong need to be put to justice.
Yeah, there's certainly a societal shift that would make that is normal in human development in history, and even in the church. Matters of discipline are less than they were in the past, for example. And so, how these executions are, that's how capital punishment is carried out. We're in a time where it would be shocking, and it would not be beneficial by any means to have very shocking and very violent public executions. I have no problem with, that's my thought on it. We're certainly in a more, there's less civilization, but more of a civilized mindset in that regard, for certainly. And you don't want to have the depravity that comes from it. Like I was just reading about this the other day in the Catholic Encyclopedia about in the French Revolution, that there were all of these very depraved women that would come out to watch the public executions, and they had a certain name for them because they would knit. They would do they just had a passion for watching the public executions and the bloodshed. There's a depravity that comes with that. It's like you can see that in very violent, video games or movies that people get addicted to and really enjoy. There's a sickness there, if that's something that you really look forward to and enjoy. But to push back on your point there, and Dan, I'd be interested to hear what you say with regard to the officials that allowed this to happen. I believe my take on it is that they bear more responsibility. And so I think even just as much, if not more, than the despicable people that did these violent acts, these unspeakable acts, I believe that they should be punished just as severely, because the degree of responsibility. Okay, if you have an individual that does this despicable thing to a person, he's responsible for that action. Okay, these officials that are above all of them, they bear responsibility for all of the crimes that are committed under them, that they cover up, they're accountable to that. So it's kind of like multiplied. There isn't the personal depravity of the act itself, but there is the bearing the responsibility. And my thought on it is that there should be serious consequences, capital punishment for people in these positions that allow these things to happen. It's so disgusting and it's so horrendous that they couldn't be bothered. They didn't bother them enough to do something about it. They had some other agenda, some other goal that was more important. And that is just so much, there isn't passion involved there. I mean, the horrible, awful, unspeakable acts are fueled by a sick passion. The government, the officials, the politicians that are covering them up have so little regard for their subjects that they should not be there, period. And there needs to be serious consequences for them, so that these kind of politicians, these people in public officials, do not get away with it, and so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, and I think that I look at it a lot, very, very much the same way. And I think we're going to have, in the United States, we're going to have a huge reckoning coming. So you can start with January 6th, right? And Liz Cheney and all the perpetrators who basically pulled off an insurrection and tried calling those who were going to protect the country insurrectionists. They flipped the tables. And I think now everything's going to come down on the actual insurrectionists, who are the members of that January 6th committee. All right, you got voter fraud. You got weaponization of the Department of Justice against Donald Trump. The Letitia Jameses and the Judge Rashans and all them. And you got all this wickedness I think is going to be brought to light. It's going to be prosecuted, and all these people are going to be found guilty. Now, in my opinion, with those people, you're basically looking at, I don't know if I want to say white collar crime, but I mean you're talking about the kind of crime where I think when it comes to Liz Cheney, charge her with treason, but if the sentence on her was just felony. She can no
Mhm.
longer vote in elections. She can no longer hold public office. She can no
Mhm.
longer be a public figure and just go away. Okay. I'd be okay with that for most of
Yeah.
these. Now,
Mhm.
when you're talking about crimes against children, it's a totally different ballgame. And
Yes.
I'm with you. When the crimes against children, everybody, all the people who were transporting the children, all the people who were committing the crimes, obviously, but then all those who are covering it up politically, I think our Lord Himself said that it was better that a millstone be drawn, put around their neck and be thrown out in the ocean than that they scandalize one of these little ones. So, in my opinion, put a millstone around their neck, throw them out in the ocean, and let God take care of them.
Yeah. I'm with you, Dad. And I guess I'm not as optimistic about the U.S. stuff. I actually think that probably nothing's going to happen. I just think that Trump didn't do it last time, so he's going to really prove it to me. It's going to be great. We're probably going to do a live stream on the 20th, so on election day on inauguration day. I think we're going to hopefully get a big group together. We'll see it. I'll have to get up probably at 3 a.m. to do it. But I think we're going to do it because I think it'll be interesting. We may do it on the 21st. We'll see. We'll keep you guys
election.
updated.
There's going to be so much. There's going to be breaking
wild.
news all day that day. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be a fun.
Well,
so
the inauguration's in the morning, right?
It's at noon Eastern.
Okay.
So it's going to be about 11 o'clock. It'll be 6-8 p.m. your time.
Oh, that works. Yeah.
And it's going to start. I mean,
working. Oh no, it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day. That's right. So people are off.
That
could work.
Yeah. Oh, lost your dad.
And we lost my dad. Yeah,
what can hear him.
What did you say again? We can hear you, Dad. You can keep talking.
Okay.
What was your thought, Dad?
Oh, that I think it'd be a great idea to do a little bit like we did on election night, and you had the 4 or 5 hour show or whatever it was, and maybe just a little bit of a rotation in and out. But I think the news is going to be breaking so hard, so fast, and so consistently that day that a long live stream would be a good idea.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to log back in again. My camera just goes out. I'm not sure why.
Strange. Yeah, it's Catholic Family Podcast, so these things happen. Yeah, I had another comment about. And that's what I was going to ask. Okay, Dad's gone, so I guess that's bad timing. But I don't know. What do you think about Tommy Robinson, Father? I don't know if you followed that much at all. But
yeah,
he is kind of becoming like Elon Musk's his hero. I don't know much about him. I've listened to a little bit. I've listened to him a little bit. I'm not a fan. Actually, I think he's a Zionist bully is kind of my impression. And
Tommy Robinson
gets to be, yeah, okay. I think so.
Yeah,
he's certainly a bully. And I think he's. I don't know if he's Jewish, but he's certainly pro-Zionist. I mean, I've heard him say that. So, and he's very like openly anti-Muslim in a way that it's like. It's not helpful. I think, I think like our conversation might even be pushing it, I suppose, saying, that they've invaded, though. I think that's true. Oh, there goes Dad again. But I don't know. I don't like his rhetoric, I suppose. I mean, what are your thoughts on him, Father? I haven't watched that much of him either, so I can't judge.
Yeah,
really.
I've listened to some of his things even some months ago. Came across it on X. But listening to like Piers Morgan, for example, talk about him. Seems like Piers is very, very against him, really detests him. So I think there's a whole nother aspect of it that I don't understand, because it's obviously been going on for a long time in the UK. I think Tommy Robinson has been doing videos since 2011 or something when this happened.
Wow.
But I would say it's certainly good that you have a bulldog, a bull in the china shop. He's going to break some china. But if that gets the levers moving to actually make some positive change and have some accountability in government, then yeah, that's a good thing. I'd also say that if I was living over there and I had family members that were getting treated this way, and I was talking to all of these people that these crimes are being committed against them, I certainly wouldn't be delicate. I certainly wouldn't be very civilized in how I approached it. So I think I don't know what to think about him because I don't know him. I don't know him, and there's just so many different levels to it.
Yeah, fair.
So,
Fair
Dan,
point.
did you have any thoughts on it?
He's not a name I'm familiar
Yeah.
enough
Okay.
to really talk intelligently about.
Yeah, but I think it's definitely a good thing that it's being brought to people's attention.
Yeah,
I
think
it's horrible that it's brought to people's attention, but if it isn't, then it isn't going to be corrected.
Yeah, and I think what you got going on there, I like to make a comparison to American politics here and say, okay, so imagine that Donald Trump, instead of taking over the Republican Party, had split from the Republican Party and had created the MAGA Party. And by creating the MAGA Party, he splits the Republican, he splits the conservative base in half. And the conservative base may be bigger than the liberals, but they're split in half. And now we have another election. Well, guess what's going to happen? The Democrats are going to win because the Republican Party is split in half.
Yeah.
That's where the British, that's where the UK is right now. And then they basically turned power over to their Liberal Party because their Conservative Party has split. But in the next phase of the story is basically the Tory Party, I think it is, the traditional Republicans in the American context are kind of dying on the vine. They're really going away. And now this Reform Party with Nigel Farage, I think, is taking off more and more. And it's probably, you can be sure that the people are waking up to a large degree because they're being just assaulted by the horrors of I mean, I heard the story of a father calling calling the police because of what the Muslims were doing to his daughter, and the police told him he needed to shut up and not say anything publicly, or else he would be put in jail for hate speech. I mean, it's just it's beyond fathoming.
But I mean, so why? And again, I'm not saying this is what should happen. I'm not for violence. Everyone, YouTube, I'm not for violence. But why are people not rioting? What is everyone waiting for? It's like, is there a reason why we're all just kind of like, yeah, okay, yeah, it's bad, it's
because
terrible.
they're putting them in prison for social media posts. They're allowing gangs of Muslims to run around with machetes, and while that is going on, saying how bad the English people are for talking badly about the Muslims who are chasing them with machetes. Right. So it's deeper. I heard a story too about this girl that was being mistreated, and they put her in prison for being drunk. These guys had done horrible things to her and had whatever. These are things I don't want to talk about. I've been purposely avoiding reading about it because there's just so much sick, awful, immoral things there. But you hear people talking about it, like the ones that are being harmed, the victims, are being put in prison while the guys that are doing it are okay and getting a job and whatever. And you know, one thing to mention that is brought up, to be fair, is that they're saying that it's specifically Pakistani Muslims that are doing this. They're saying that you have Muslims from India and you have Muslims from all these other different countries that are not doing this, at least not nearly the rate. They're specifically saying that the Pakistani Muslims, there's a very, very depraved culture there with the men that have come over from Pakistan. So, to be fair, that is a point. There are differences in the different countries where they have, there's different cultures in all of them. So,
yeah, well, and part of it is literally like their form of Islam, right? I mean, it's Sunnis and Shiites. I couldn't tell you which one's which and what they believe, but some of them really truly believe in like ownership of women, and it's really, really old fashioned, but not just old fashioned. I mean, we're talking about medieval, but like barbaric medieval. It's nuts. It really is. And again, these are just people that the governments. Our conversation comes back over and over and over to our governments being totally incompetent or evil. Both. They're evil. They're evil.
I think it's more. I think it's gone beyond competent. I mean,
yeah.
You can't run in the face this directly into the face of common sense and have it just be a matter of stupidity. And I mean, you look at Gavin Newsom out there and all the things. I can't imagine that all of the decisions they've made that have made them so vulnerable to a fire. Can't just be stupidity. There has to be a certain element of we want to destroy something. The old guard, the old way of doing things. We want to bring in something new. There's got to be a bigger agenda at play.
Yeah, I think there's certainly these are people that are globalists. But it's like Canada, Trudeau. Who is he? He's the World Economic Forum. He's like the darling of the World Economic Forum. He was propped up as one of the most wonderful examples of their agenda, and we saw that agenda come out with the lockdowns in Canada and due to COVID. We see the Gavin Newsom, Nancy Pelosi's nephew, who is a star of the Green Party and whatnot. So 100%, there's on those in those positions. I think there's certainly a lack of care for their subject, for the people under them, not their subjects, but there's a lack of concern for people's needs because there is an end to be achieved, and so the end justifies the means.
Right.
So there is so much incompetence on the lower levels, but certainly, yeah, there's definitely agendas, globalist, communist, etc.
Yeah, it's anti-human.
Yeah, for sure. Well, at this stage, just again, want to thank everybody for being part of the live stream, and if anybody hasn't yet, like it, hit the thumbs up button. Still seeing some activity in the chat section here. I don't know if there's any questions that were asked that we missed, but also if anybody has anything they want to ask myself or Dan or Kevin. Kevin's probably going to be heading out here so he can get some sleep because he does have a life outside of podcasting.
Believe it or not, like 2 or 3 other jobs,
Yeah. So
and I gotta brag a little bit. I do have a basketball tournament coming up next week. Pretty cool. I'll be doing the play-by-play for a big Adidas tournament in Munich, and then again in another German city in February. So pretty cool.
Will it be in English or German?
English. German would be rough. German would be rough. Talking in German I can handle, but no, that's too much. But no, pretty cool. So everyone say a prayer that works out. That's kind of the dream job. So it's cool to be able to dabble my toes a little bit in that warm water every couple times a year, which is enough. That's enough for me. Anyway, so there's a question from our friend Andrew.
Yeah, about audiobooks. Seymour has good books about crisis in the church. Is there any effort to turn these books into audiobooks? None that I know of. I haven't heard anything on this score.
But it's a fantastic suggestion. And honestly, I'm surprised, Andrew. I've never thought of this, but because I can tell you that reading an audiobook is a skill that only certain people have. Now, it just happens that 2 of the 3 of us right here have that skill. I'm the one that doesn't. And so Father and Kevin are both excellent readers. Our son William is very good. Lisa, of course, is very, very good at reading out loud. And we've got a couple of others that would, definitely have the skill to do it. The question just obviously becomes time.
Yeah.
Ain't no allowance though. I've actually asked Father Dominic Radecki. I think it was Father Dominic. We've talked before about potential podcasts and stuff, and someday I'll get the Radecki fathers on. It's kind of a battle of tug of war. They've never said no, so I'm going to get them on. And I did ask them that question, and I believe Father Radecki said that an audio book is, or it's in, or they're thinking about it. I sorry guys, it's been a while. It's been several months since the email, but I know that the conversation came up, so it is on their minds. And I can tell you, on Dad's note, it's easier to read. So if you're reading a book, let's say, I don't know, I'm looking right now, that's not true because it didn't have too many names. I can tell you, read something like Tumultuous Times, and they're giving about every person who was involved in Vatican II. Good luck pronouncing those names and not
French names, especially. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I mean, or even Italian. I mean, just try reading.
Yeah.
Father knows this. You try recording. So try recording even the lives of the saints. and you got so you have to read 2 pages. So say 2 pages takes, I don't know, Father, what, 8 minutes, 9 minutes, something like that, or 5 minutes, whatever it is. But if you have names in there and you don't want to sound like, hey, I'm a total, bumpkin, then you have to either research it or you have to wing it and think, okay, did I get it enough? And you probably didn't, so you have to re-record it. And then did you get it? Oh, I'm telling you guys, no, I don't know if people understand how hard audiobooks are, especially something like Tumultuous Times. Someone's going to have to get paid a lot of money for that, honestly, and they'll deserve it.
And honestly, I think books like that, they're wonderful resources, but you don't sit down to listen to an encyclopedia. It's kind of the way those books are written. But there is a one book, What Has Happened to the Catholic Church. I think they wrote that in the 90s. I think that one would be a definitely good audiobook format. But some of the other ones it's hard enough to read it, let alone listen to it. I mean, it'd be great if you have trouble sleeping at night. You could put that on and you'd probably knock out pretty quickly. But yeah, it's a good point, and it is something that certainly takes a lot of time. I've said it before that if you're reading something, if it takes you an hour to record it, that means it's going to take you at least 2 hours to edit it, and then to make sure it's ready to go.
We have considered, Catholic Fan and Podcast, we have considered spinning off a channel for audiobooks. I mean, we already have, of course, Father, your Reverend Goodyear, which is one of the all-time great read books ever. We had two. We've got a couple for Advent that we have. One for that Lisa did, one that you did as well, I think, Father. And then Father Borja has done a book for us. And then we've got Lisa's Christmas Crib, which kind of comes off as a book almost. Yeah. And so we have considered spinning off a new channel that is just for audiobooks. And I think that it would be well received. It's just a matter of who can find the time to do it.
Well, and guys, I know I don't like doing this, but if you do want more content, you can support us on Patreon. It is one of those things, the best case scenario is if we started to make enough money that we could actually start to, I have, 3 jobs. And so if I could quit one of them and do more time, then I could do more stuff and read more audiobooks and provide more ideas, etc. It is just the case. So as Father said, this stuff takes a lot of time. I'm up right now at 11:20 p.m. Got to get up early tomorrow because the kids always wake up at 6 no matter what. So no matter what, I have to get up early, even though in my mind, I'm like, I want to sleep in because it's Saturday. I'm not actually going to sleep in because the kids get up. But anyway, you really can support us. I'll attach the link again to Patreon. And honestly, guys, it really is like $5 a month really helps. We have a lot of people, everyone listening right now, you get $5 a month. It's a coffee for you. But it adds up. I tell you what, it adds up, and it really does help. And eventually, we do want to do big things, and we want to do huge documentaries about the entire Catholic Church from 1917 until now, or 1900 or whatever. And we want to go up to the mountain and kind of pilfer their entire library, and really pilfer is the wrong word, but you guys know what I'm saying.
We want to retell the history of the 20th century and 21st century, because history has been told history is always told by the winners of wars. And who's been winning all the wars the last 150 years? It's the communists. So who's telling the history stories? It's the communists. But I can tell you that up in the mountain, they've got a huge library and a repository of bulletins and Catholic material from all over the world from that time period, basically 1900 forward. And I mean, if we had, and I know Lisa would love nothing more than to get up there and go through them and start extracting stories that we could use to retell the real, true 20th century told from a Catholic perspective. And obviously it would take a lot to get her up there and time well spent, and then to actually record everything and produce it would be just a huge amount of time.
Yeah. Well, and that's something I've been learning, and I don't want to keep making Kevin's head bigger here, but there's just so much time that goes into these projects, and time is money. And, for me, this is something that I do. This is my job. This is my job as a priest. I don't need money to support a family, so I'm not looking for any money in it. But, like Kevin, especially, he's got a young family. That's definitely could use some help there. And, that's something too that you know, that it's not just time, it's also, you know, there's a way to do these things that they need to be done well. And that requires good equipment, and that requires time to research how to do it well. Because, you know, these are just, I think these are interesting conversations, and people tune into live shows for interaction and stuff. But, you know, you look at those videos out there, people that are getting millions of views or whatever, you know, it's good content, and that takes time, and that takes good equipment and all those other things. So it's not just, so that's a point too. But I wanted to highlight one of these comments here talking about the Catholic monarch. Crusader Filmworks was asking about that, and this touches on something that is a big sore spot for me when we get into prophecies, especially when they are governing, like, you know, the way things are going to go in society, and how there's going to be these wonderful things that happen later on, and this Catholic monarch that's going to come, and very specific prophecies about future events. And Catholic Family Podcast had a great excerpt from an answer to a question like this that Father Gabriel Lavery gave at one of the Fatima conferences, I think 2 years ago, that was talking about the 3 days of darkness, and that prophecy, that false prophecy that has been debunked on so many different levels, even by, you know, well, anyway, it's one of those things that there's a lot of prophecies out there, and what I know about the Catholic monarch prophecy, I don't think it's legit at all. It has a lot of the trademarks of a false prophecy, and, you know, building up a castle in the clouds of what the future is going to bring, and hold to this prop. I don't think that's legitimate myself. Of course, I haven't done a lot of research into it, but so many times, you know, the prophecies that are made, that you know, God giving future knowledge of events, it's for a purpose. That's one of the biggest giveaways to me, is what is the purpose of a prophecy?
Exactly.
It is for some spiritual good. It's to help you get closer to God in heaven, not to give you a hope of temporal advantage and temporal blessings.
Christ was born in a stable. You know, I mean, I think that's, again, we always say, oh, you know, there's going to be a great, and again, and I love the idea. I'm a total what's the word, romantic. I love that idea of a great monarch, and I would love to see that happen. And I think it actually could. My theory about the whole idea of getting a pope back is through a great saint, and I think that there's an idea with that. It comes in there's a lot of legal issues and stuff. Guys, you can message me if you want to talk more about that. But I do think that I like the idea of that, because I think that gives us something that we could say that could happen. And I think it could, but I'm totally with Father. I think these prophecies are just like, no, come on. I mean, I don't think that's how it works. I mean, as you said, Father, I think you're exactly right. And when you start looking into, like, what Father Gabriel has looked into with La Salette, and it's like, be really careful with La Salette, because there are different very legitimate, and the church generally accepted it as it went on. And the people, you know, Melanie and Maximin, what was his name? They got older, and they started to change their stories, and then other people changed their stories as well, and it got really strange. It's the same with the 3 days of darkness, right? The story
that
of
was really,
oh, it's crazy. Like the 3 days of darkness just came from a friend of the confessor of Anna Maria Teigi or something like that. It's not from her at all. It was something like, I heard a story one time from someone who knew her. What? And
the
somehow
whole world
it gets
going to convert. Exactly. In the time of Pope Pius IX or whatever.
Exactly. And the bishops of the U.S., several of them, I remember Father Gabriel had this, I think from Chicago, Boston, somewhere, condemned it. They said, this is absolutely not true. This is not, you cannot put anything into this. It was not just like, oh, la, la, la. No, they said no. And I think that's, again, somehow still newspapers picked it up in people's imaginations. 3 days of darkness, candles.
Well,
okay,
Yeah, and as Father Gabriel, I think, pointed out in his discussion there, it's one of those things that was circulated in certain books that had a lot of good information about what was going on with Vatican II and how that was false. And so a lot of traditional Catholics learned that as they were learning about the changes in the church. And so one was true, so the other must be true. And that's not the case of these things.
Right. Yeah.
It's not the case of these things. And you could see that if you go to the sources, and also the theological errors, especially the 3 days of darkness one, it's the biggest one to me, because we grew up with that. We thought that was true until our priest told us, actually, no, it's not. But when you look at some of the things, like the demons are running around, they're going to possess you if you look outside, and it's just how all these very fantastical things that sound really interesting. And that's one of your keys to say, this is probably not a legitimate prophecy, because what things are prophesied, they're vague and they're
Father Dominic gave a sermon on 3 Days of Darkness, and it was all the same stuff we're talking about here. And but one of the things that stuck out to me was he said that there were several aspects of what was supposed to go on that were superstitious. And it's like, that makes a lot of sense. And kind of go through, I forget which ones exactly, but
I've had people ask me to bless their duct tape, because the duct tape covering up the windows has to be blessed. It's like, nope, I'm not going to do that.
No, and you see how it's easy to get into that, and why. I mean, like it's kind of the romantic and being prepared, and that's having blessed candles in your house is certainly a good thing, But I think again, it's kind of like be kind of aware of these things, and I think before you get into any prophecy, and I really mean any, certainly talk to your priest about it, because there are some really wonky ones, and even the ones you think are legit, they're not always legit. What you're reading is not always what was actually legitimate. So be really, really careful. And again, that's coming from priests that I've listened to, Father Gabriel, Father Dominic, exactly, that they'll tell you, hey, just honestly, I think they would even say, just don't even mess with it. It's just not worth it. I mean, Fatima, maybe, I mean, there's some, of course, that we can, really, trust and regard, but even then, it's still private revelation. It's still, it can be dangerous.
Keep fiction in the fiction realm. I love a good fiction story. I love Tolkien. I listen to it every year.
Me too.
In my driving, I listen to the audiobook. I love fiction. It's wonderful to have these things, but, keep that out of theology. Keep that out of the realm of faith. It's not the proper realm for that.
Well, I think what's happened in our world today, and I see this all, I've fallen victim to it myself, is that we've been lied to about so many things that you start to look at, you look at everything we've been taught and say, okay, I'm going to reject that. And then what happens, you go down in these rabbit holes, and there's the devil waiting for you to say, hey, Hitler was actually a hero. The world and the earth is flat. And he's got all these different rabbit holes to take you down that you're going to believe, because we've been lied to by the same people, that are going to reject these. But yeah.
Well, and I got to take that a little farther, Dad, because I mean, again, purely my opinion, if you want to believe Hitler was a good guy, I don't care at all. Like, I really don't care. You can believe, sure, don't do what he did, don't do what he said. But if you want to just think, oh yeah, he died a Catholic, okay, good for you. You're very misinformed, but I don't think, Father can correct me if I'm wrong, but whatever, if that's your private belief, fine. My problem with it is when you start publishing that publicly. If you go online and you are a Catholic and you're having Catholic conversations, everyone knows you're a traditional Catholic, and then they start associating you with really dumb ideas, or what everyone else considers to be really dumb ideas. It's dangerous, it's bad, and it will never, ever help anyone. Maybe Father can comment. I mean, everyone knows. I hope everyone knows my opinions on Hitler. But I guess my point being, if it's your private thought, is it bad to have? If you want to think the Earth's flat, okay, good for you.
Okay.
I don't care. I mean,
that is something that I have strong beliefs on it personally. But the flat Earth thing, that's not something that you're bound one way or another. However, on the point of Hitler, if you're bringing that up, it's like, your point about what it does to other people, 100% valid. Yes, 100% agree. But what sources are you getting that information and that mindset from? Because he was an absolute enemy of the Catholic Church. He was an absolute enemy of the Catholic Church.
I know.
He said the two greatest enemies of the Reich, of the Nazi, whatever, is communism and the Catholic Church, because they both demand the whole person, body and soul, of an individual. So he was absolutely anti-Catholic, anti-Christian. He was very much into a lot of superstitious stuff and signs and all this pagan stuff. He was not a good guy. The circumstances surrounding his rise to power, they were brought about by the evils of Western powers, the United States, Woodrow Wilson and others. World War II should never have happened. Germany should never have been crippled the way they were. But Hitler was not a good guy, period. 100%. Yeah. So yeah, to me, that's a problem. Even if you have that belief, then, well, I guess you don't believe that Pope Pius XII was a good pope, and that Hitler was a better individual to follow than Pope Pius XII. So I've got some real problems with that personal, private view.
Right.
Fair. I appreciate you taking a stronger stance than I do, Father, because I now that you say it, I agree. I mean, I think it is really absurd. And what's crazy is that it really is. Someone watched a video and they're just convinced by it. And it's like, okay, but that's, again, it goes back to the classical education, I think, right? It's like, okay, but your information what you believe shouldn't just be coming from what you're informed by, right? I mean, just because you see something and they say it's true, that doesn't mean it's true. That doesn't mean you should take that as your own. You have to rationalize. You have to reason. You have to say, does this make sense? And I don't think people always do that. I think it's just kind of like,
it's the association.
It sounds cool, so okay.
It's just like what we were saying with regard to like the false prophecies that came from books that had good things in them about what was going on in the church. There's the association of they were right about this or they're right about that. So if you have an author, somebody that's exposing the evils of our day, the evils of capitalism taken too far, or unrestrained capitalism, okay, that's true. That's a problem. But just because the same person that says that Hitler was good, doesn't mean that both of those statements are true. So there's the association there. Right. And that's something that I just had this conversation with somebody the other day, just about how grateful I am to be a Catholic, because we have this truth in the church that we know that it is always true. You can always follow it. And that's your guide. That's your anchor. And outside of that, history, how much of history is corrupted? How much of history is twisted? How many things seem to be the truth we find out later aren't? Health, how many things we thought 10 years ago we found out to be wrong. There's all of these different shifting sands, and we have the truth in the church. It's such a nice thing to have. And that's something that with COVID and all of the ups and downs of what was going on and why it was going on and what was true, what wasn't true, but brought that out to me so much more strongly. Just to appreciate having the truth from the church. It's such a beautiful thing. And it makes me think of like these different politicians or others that get, what's coming to mind is Zuckerberg, taking this new stance about allowing, unrestricted free speech or whatever on Facebook. And people are calling him out for, shifting this way and that way and this way and that way. It's like, if you aren't grounded in the truth, what can you expect? Yeah. For one thing, you're going to be motivated by personal gain to the exclusion of other things. Yes. Or your own agenda. Sure. But you also don't have truth. You don't have a rock to stabilize you. And that's so important today, because things are crazy out there. And with AI and with all these other things that are coming, it's going to get even crazier. And if you aren't firmly grounded in truth and not distracted by all of these other side things that sound good, that are fantastical and wonderful, but aren't based in truth, then you're going to get in trouble. Sorry for the long rant there.
That's kind of a plug for the traditionalist channel in my mind, because basically we're looking at a forum here that is going to be oriented towards intellectual curiosity, right? We're going to be getting into areas that are maybe outside of our comfort zone, that maybe are current events or things like that. But the big difference, if you look at Joe Rogan again, and he's a guy that really doesn't have rocks. That he's fantastic in terms of being intellectually curious and intellectually honest, but he doesn't have those core values. And I think what you're going to find with the group here on the traditionalists is that we start from the proper concrete foundation of the Catholic faith. And then we can go and we can discuss these, more nebulous, these more difficult issues, but we can discuss them properly because we have the right foundation.
Right. Yes. 100%. Yeah. Hopefully that will, that'll be the case going forward, and we'll be able to grow this and help reach more people. We're coming up to a 2-hour mark here. I think chat has pretty much died down. I think we got the questions here. It's probably a good time to wrap it up. I know Kevin is ready to get to bed.
My eyes are drooping.
So, But everybody that's been listening, thanks, especially if you've been here from the beginning. Appreciate that. And
real quickly, everyone tell us, did Father do a good job hosting this? I think Father did a great job.
I give a thumbs up.
A thumbs up, round of applause. Everyone let us know. Give me your last comment. You get thumbs up or thumbs down.
It seems like it's really easy until you're in this position and you're like, oh, I got to think outside of just what I'm saying now. And
I can tell you, Father, exactly. Man, I love being in this seat. This is so much easier. Just kind of, wow, my brain can flow in one smooth direction rather than, okay, if Dad doesn't comment on this, then I have to say it's hard, right? It's good. It really is, but you did a good job, Father. No, but it really is. It's a skill that not everyone has, and it's something that you did good. You done good.
Yeah, it's something.
Done good.
It's a challenge for myself because I don't want to do it. I'm a lot happier not being in front of the camera and just listening to other people talk. That's my natural inclination. But hey, we've got to challenge ourselves, and it's for a good cause. So appreciate that.
We're all working a little bit outside our comfort zone, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, indeed. Well, thanks so much for joining, Kevin. As always a pleasure. Always fun to talk. Mr. Davis, always love having you on. Always love listening to you. So thanks for joining. Everybody that's listening, thanks a lot. Hold to tradition. Say a prayer for us here. It is a sacrifice of time, and we want to do good. We want to do well. We want to give you good content, and pray that we persevere in that goal and achieve it. So thanks a lot, everybody. God bless you. Take care, and you'll be